What I think I'll do is just tell you a little bit of background how I got involved in the concept of nutrition, micellization, absorption, etc. When I was at the university as an organic chemist, principally, we developed a lot of different chemicals that were really involved with anti-cancer research, and we developed a lot of modifications of very active substances to try and either improve the absorption, utilization, reduce toxicity, etc. So that whole process becomes one of a delivery system, and involves a lot of things you do to enhance the effectiveness of anything that you ingest. But I was interested always in nutrition all the way back. This is now going to the late 1960s, which is pretty good since I'm only 39 now, which you can tell. Also, I don't take any credit for being old because my hair's gone. I lost that when I was 22 and 23. So they told me that if you used your brain a lot, your hair would fall out. So I assumed I take full credit for that. It has nothing to do with the fact that my father was bald and my grandfather was bald. So when I was at the university, we were doing a lot of things with these anti-cancer agents, a lot of other chemicals. I got interested in looking at nutrition. I felt, well, there's some things that we take every day and we eat every day, and we should be able to absorb those every day. And there was sort of a beginning time of nutritional supplementation. I think probably you know some of the people who were on television, some are still living, that used to take 30, 40 pills a day, and I always thought, boy, that's sort of intriguing. Why would you need to take so many things? And there must be some issue involved here. Most people think you are what you eat. How many people think you are what you eat? Well, that's not really true. You're not what you eat, you're only what you absorb and use. So no matter what you take in, if you don't absorb it and use it, it's of very little value. So because of that, I was very intrigued about particularly a group of nutrients that were fat-soluble. Because I said, well, those don't probably get absorbed too well, and research showed that they didn't. Maybe vitamin E, 25% is absorbed under normal circumstances. So I said, that's not very efficient. And of course, also during that time, I was looking at other ways to enhance absorption. We were the first ones to take niacin and put them in little pellets in a capsule and make them time release so that you didn't get flushing, so that you could take high levels for cholesterol. We made some chewable things so you can enhance absorption that way. I did some ion exchange resin B12 so you could properly absorb that. But then when I got really interested in was the fat solubles, because I knew they were poorly absorbed. Vitamin A, vitamin E, beta carotene, vitamin D, vitamin K, and a whole bunch of other things, fatty acids, some of the things that you now know as important in tomatoes like lutein, lycopene. All those things are fat soluble, which means they're oils, which means they don't get well absorbed. And the reason for that is the body uses a water system for transport. So your bloodstream is water, your tissues are water, in and out of cells are water. So if they're all water, how do you get oils to go in? Well, the body has a unique mechanism to do that. It's called forming micelles. So micelles are a natural process of the digestion that occurs in the body. And what that really means is you take a great big blob of oil, and the body, through pancreatic enzymes and bile acids, breaks that up into a tiny little particle called a micelle, which is really a little blob of oil that's now reduced to a tiny, tiny size. And then it's surrounded by water. So now the body can actually pick it up, transport it, and use it. That's a normal process, but it's not necessarily very efficient to do that. So the thought was, well, if that's really what's going on, and by the way, let me tell you what a micelle has to be obviously smaller than a red blood cell or anything. Otherwise, they keep slipping in and out of of the vessels as well. So what I thought about is, well, what if we create a system where we make a micelle out of fat solubles in advance? That is, before you take it. Is there a way to take a fat soluble material, put it into a micelle, so that you now have it in a water solution? And the answer is yes, you could. That was done a lot in other areas of chemistry. So I thought, well, why not for nutrition? So what we did is we came upon a method of being able to take a fat-soluble oil, break it up, into a tiny micelle by using some naturally occurring things and actually making that particle size very, very small. We were able to do that, and the particle size we were able to come up with a lot of work, and even now, even better, is something that's in the range of, this won't mean much, but I'll explain it to you, 0.05 micron to 1 micron. Now, say, well, what the heck does that mean? But rather than me explain it to you in terms of meters and feet and inches, let me just tell you that a red blood cell is about 10 microns. So what you're talking about is something that's 1/200th to maybe about 1/10 the size of a red blood cell. So you're trying to get things that are 1/100th the size of a red blood cell so that it can properly transport. So that's what we do when we create the concept of a micelle. And we were able to do that with vitamin E, vitamin A, beta-carotene, all the early days we were doing that. I associated early on with some investigators from Australia who were interested in this because they read a paper that I had written. And we started to work on some absorption studies. And I think some of you may have seen, I guess, these charts that are floating around. And the data in these charts, actually a lot of it was taken from a paper I wrote in 1989. What we found was in human studies that if we took an oil form and a micellized form of the same nutrient, we could actually look at absorption studies and say, well, what happens if you give an oil in terms of how much gets into the bloodstream and how fast, and then you switch those people over, give them the micellized version, and do the same thing, and then you cross them and repeat that. So it's what's called a crossover trial. When we did that, we found that the absorption of vitamin E, vitamin A, was actually almost 5 times higher in terms of actual levels in the plasma. We also found out that the rate of absorption was several times higher, which means you absorb things faster. We also found out that other things, which was most people don't know, don't interfere with micellization process in terms of absorption. So certain foods might block uptake of certain nutrients, whereas micellization sometimes just bypasses that. So that's why you get a better and faster absorption. We also did the same thing with beta-carotene, and we found out that the same was true. Also, not in those charts, but in the original paper we published, there was a lot of data that we did on platelet aggregation. We found that vitamin E can actually break up platelets, which is the thing that clogs your bloodstream. So if you go to your cardiologist, he wants you to take aspirin to break up the platelets, clumping. Thrombin causes things to like stick together. Well, that's good in case you get cut. You don't want to be bleeding all over the place. But on the other hand, you don't want too much of that to be occurring because you're going to have problems with clogging vessels. Vitamin E, one of the functions it does do is it helps protect against that clumping or coagulation. But the reason it wasn't very interesting most of the time, we found the oil forms don't really do well in blocking that aggregation. But micellized ones did, almost 2.5 to 3 times better. Also, we did some work in the early days of looking at fatty acids, which was in that paper but not in the data, in looking at some things related to dogs. Now, why would we do that? Not because we wanted to test anything on dogs for humans. It's because I used to raise Great Danes, and I was interested in my dogs. And they had skin problems, itchies, scratches, etc. And everybody always says, give the dogs oil. How many people hear about that? Oil's good for their skin. Well, certain oils are good for the skin. The ones that are good for the skin happen to be the ones that are the EPA, DHA that you hear about in fish oils. Obviously, vegetable oils have linoleic acid, but everybody's got tons of linoleic acid. Everybody takes linoleic acid because you eat vegetable oils all day long, whether you know it or not. So what we did was we realized that that type of oil probably is very helpful, but when you give dogs just that oil, they didn't improve. But when we micellized it and made fish oil water-soluble, they had significant improvements. In the one study we did, just with the oil, we only saw improvement in less than half of the animals. When we did it with the micellized version, we found about 95% improved significantly. This was done with veterinarians. By the way, this did result in a product which you probably, if you have animals, go to a pet store, you'll find Lipiderm any place. Lipiderm is my product that I did. It's still sold in all the pet stores. You can find that all over the country. So it's nothing really to do with Biometics, but shows you that micellization has a role in products that have been around and actually improve things. So if you go to a pet store, look for Lipiderm. If you also see Dermasol, which is a vitamin A micelle for topical, I noticed somebody was mentioning the fact that they took the nutrients because of the carpal tunnel syndrome, put it on their hands and said, I feel good. We'll say, how can something you take in this way work good this way? Well, that's because the micellization process allows you to go through epithelial lining tissues, which is intestinal tract, but also skin. Very similar types of tissues. So if you go to a pet store, you'll see Dermasol in a gel form and also a spray for dogs. And just so you know, we actually tested this on humans before I let my dogs do that. So Dermasol, is true, was actually tested on humans with an associate. He is actually a co-discoverer of retin A. And we did the work with that on humans. He's since done things with it in humans as well. But we did all that work, and then I could go take it to the dogs because I knew it was safe, because I'm not going to be messing around with really, patients that need the help. I want to make sure they're taken care of. So that's a little bit of the background of the concept of what we've done with micellization.